It began with smoke, not from an engine malfunction or battery fire, but from rage. On a warm afternoon in downtown Chicago, plumes of black smoke twisted into the sky above a shattered Tesla showroom. Crowds spilled onto the streets, holding signs, chanting slogans, their voices thick with fury. Some wore masks, some waved flags. But all of them had one thing in common. They weren't just protesting policies, they were coming for a name. Elon Musk. In minutes, videos surfaced across every platform. Tesla Model Ys torched to husks, glass panels smashed in rhythmic violence, a banner reading, "Future kills" torn in half. The protest had a center, and it wasn't the Capitol. It was a showroom, a symbol of the man they now called the enemy. No one expected it to escalate this far. But maybe, just maybe, Elon did. He didn't tweet. He didn't speak. But those close to him noticed the silence wasn't fear. It was focus. Because when the world tried to erase his legacy, Elon didn't retreat. He rewrote the next chapter. And yet, this wasn't just a reaction to one chaotic day. It was the climax of a much longer buildup. Years of simmering distrust, of ideological war zones growing more volatile. To some, Elon had become the face of unchecked capitalism, of tech overreach, of a future barreling forward with no room for those left behind. The crowd in Chicago didn't organize overnight. This rage had been fermenting in the corners of social media, university campuses, union halls. The protesters weren't just vandals. Many were teachers, students, former Tesla owners, even ex-employees. They didn't want to destroy the future. They wanted to be part of designing it, and they felt they had been shut out. Some held up signs with old tweets. Others wore shirts that read, "People over profit." There were chants that didn't even mention Elon's name, but everyone knew who they were there for. The smoke, the chaos, the shattered glass, those were just the symptoms. The diagnosis was deeper. And the patient, modern ambition itself. Back at the compound in Texas, Elon watched with an unreadable stare. His fingers twitched, not with anxiety but anticipation. For a man obsessed with data, this wasn't just chaos. It was input, a signal, a test. The world had made its move, and now he had to calculate the response. The press scrambled for statements. Analysts predicted stock collapse. Politicians distanced themselves. But Elon remained unreachable. Even his closest advisors were shut out. He spent those hours walking the quiet halls of his design center, stopping only to gaze at a prototype that hadn't yet seen daylight. A personal project, a plan for what might come next. He'd always said he didn't care about legacy, but watching the flames dance across the screens, it was clear. Something inside him had ignited too. Section 1. The fall from grace. The shift didn't happen overnight. For years, Elon Musk had danced on the razor's edge of public admiration and mass criticism. He had been the darling of innovation, the tech world's messiah. Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink. The man who made electric cars cool and sent rockets to the heavens. But somewhere along the way, something changed. Maybe it was the way he took over Twitter, rebranded it as X, and fired thousands in the name of free speech. Maybe it was his cryptic memes, controversial takes, or sudden endorsements. Or maybe it was just timing. The world was changing, and Elon, once its golden boy, became its scapegoat. At first, it was subtle. Editorials criticizing his business ethics. Think pieces about the dangers of billionaire worship. Then came the petitions, the boycotts, and the viral hashtags. Search to cancel Musk trended for days. Still he posted. Still he built. Still he defied. But the Chicago riot was different. This wasn't digital outrage. It was fire in the real world. And it hurt, not just the company, but the myth. The idea that Elon was untouchable, always one step ahead, always winning. Now he was watching Teslas burn on loop from every screen in his home. His empire wasn't crumbling, but it had been cracked. Some said he deserved it. Others called it the death of innovation. For Elon, it was neither. It was a message. He didn't respond. Not in words, not yet. But behind closed doors, he began to build something else. Something no one was ready for. Not his critics, not his investors, not even his allies. He wasn't trying to win back the world. He was preparing to live without it. In those early days following the protest, a strange calm settled around him. As headlines raged and debates roared, Elon did what he always did when threatened. He retreated into the lab. Not a literal one this time, but a mental forge. Schematics sprawled across his desk. Red ink circled concepts no one else had seen. He wasn't planning a press tour or damage control. He was designing an escape from dependency, from applause, from needing to be understood. He began meeting with engineers in private, not Tesla staff, not SpaceX veterans, outsiders, idealists, misfits, people who believed in the wild again. If the world didn't want what he had to offer, maybe it was time to offer it somewhere else, maybe even off-world. It wasn't just his reputation that had been scorched. It was the illusion that he still belonged here. They didn't speak in business terms anymore. These were not meetings, they were councils. Sketches of off-grid vehicles, autonomous habitats, long-range orbital systems began to cover entire walls. Elon started sleeping at the lab again. His messages to outside investors became rarer, terser. His obsession was no longer survival, it was reinvention. One night he stood outside under the Texas stars, holding a piece of carbon fiber molded into a wing. He ran his fingers along the edge like a man memorizing the contours of a dream. Somewhere behind him, an assistant asked, "What are we building exactly?" He didn't answer immediately. Then he whispered more to himself than anyone else, "A way out." And that was the moment everything began to change. Section 2. Exile by design. The announcement didn't come through a press release, it came through silence. Weeks passed, and Elon Musk remained off-grid. No tweets, no appearances, no leaks. While markets trembled and speculators filled the vacuum with guesses, something unusual happened. People began to forget. But not everyone. A quiet rumor began circulating through underground tech circles, whispered at after-hours hackathons, passed between encrypted messages. Something about a site being built in the Nevada desert. Not a Tesla factory, not a SpaceX launch pad. Something new, something unnamed. Reporters tried to follow the trail, but the paper trail had been buried. Contractors signed NDAs thicker than books. No satellite-captured construction. Only the occasional delivery truck disappearing into dust suggested movement at all. But Elon wasn't hiding. He was designing his own exile. His most trusted collaborators called it Project Lazarus. A resurrection, not of a brand, but of belief. A return to a version of Elon no one had seen since the early PayPal days. Lean, unfiltered, willing to gamble everything. The project's goals weren't commercial. They weren't even political. They were personal. He wasn't trying to impress the world anymore. He was trying to outbuild it. Deep beneath the desert surface, a facility was being carved like a bunker fused with a laboratory. It was part science fiction, part survival shelter. It housed AI clusters powered by geothermal energy, experimental propulsion units, and a prototype command center unlike anything the world had ever seen. But more than technology, it held purpose. In exile, Elon had found something purer than power: clarity. He no longer needed applause nor headlines. He was no longer tethered to stock prices or media narratives. He had become an idea again, a dangerous one. And ideas, once unleashed, don't burn. They evolve. The fire in Chicago had tried to erase him, but in the stillness of the desert, Elon Musk was becoming something else entirely. His days were spent immersed in blueprints and simulations, and his nights in total silence. There were no calls, no distractions, just the hum of machines and the occasional flash of a welding torch. Project Lazarus wasn't a plan for revival. It was a blueprint for departure. A select few began arriving, handpicked from around the world. A robotics engineer from Seoul, a materials scientist from Zurich, a software visionary from Nairobi. They came not for money, but for vision. They came because they believed what Elon believed, that when the world burns your future, you don't rebuild it, you redesign it. And far beneath the desert moon, in that hidden forge of rebellion, they built. Section 3, The Visitor. It was nearly midnight when the perimeter alarm sounded. For weeks, the desert winds had howled in solitude, but now headlights cut through the darkness. A single car. Not a delivery truck, not one of theirs. Security protocols initiated. Sensors scanned. Drones hovered in silence. The vehicle stopped at the base of the ridge. The driver exited, hands raised, face shadowed by a hoodie. The biometric scan ran automatically. And then, something strange happened. Access granted. Inside the command center, Elon stood frozen, eyes on the monitor. Only one person outside the current Lazarus roster had that clearance. Justine, his first wife. He hadn't seen her in years, not since the headlines, the memoirs, the quiet settlements. But now here she was, stepping into his exile like a ghost from a forgotten version of himself. She didn't flinch at the lab's alien hum. She didn't ask for a tour. She simply said, "You can't run from the world you helped build." Her voice didn't carry accusation, just truth. And maybe that was worse. They walked for hours through the corridors. She saw what few had ever seen: his sketches, his doubts, his fears laminated onto screens. She asked no questions. He gave no speeches. It was the silence that cut deepest. At one point, she paused beside a chamber housing a cylindrical pod. Elon watched her study it, a pod meant for atmospheric survival, for departure, for goodbye. "You always had a gift for escaping," she said. Elon looked at her then, not as the man on magazine covers, but as the boy who once dreamed of Mars from a South African bedroom. "I'm not escaping," he whispered. She met his eyes. "Then what are you doing?" He hesitated. For the first time in weeks, doubt flickered. Not in his plan, but in its meaning. Project Lazarus wasn't just a way forward. It was a refusal to go back. And now someone from that past stood in front of him, not to pull him back, but to remind him that even visionaries bleed. When she left at sunrise, she didn't take any data. She didn't threaten to expose him. All she said was, "Don't forget that even gods need humanity." And with that, the desert swallowed her silhouette. Elon stood alone once again, but something inside had shifted. Section 4. The Signal. 3 days after Justine left, the satellite picked up an anomaly. It wasn't a natural event, not seismic, not solar. It was artificial, coded, precise. A burst of encrypted data traveling across multiple bands. Someone, somewhere, was trying to make contact. At first, Elon assumed it was a breach. His security team ran checks. No leaks, no hacks. But then he recognized the pattern, the cadence. It wasn't random. It was familiar. The signal was one of his own. Specifically, an early protocol embedded in Starlink during its beta phase. A fail-safe communication line he'd buried deep beneath commercial layers, meant only for internal emergencies. No one outside his original team should have known it existed, but someone did, and they were using it to call him. The message was short, fragmented, but unmistakable. Return not requested, but required. Lazarus is known. Others are watching. It wasn't signed, but Elon didn't need a name. There were only a handful of people who had ever touched that protocol, and fewer who could break into it now. The desert base erupted into motion. Lazarus team members scrambled to secure channels, update redundancies, recalibrate their internal systems. Paranoia grew. Was it a warning? A threat? A trap? But Elon didn't panic. He listened. If Lazarus was known, then so was its purpose. And if others were watching, then someone had found him, or worse, predicted him. He gathered the core team, not investors, not executives, thinkers, builders, fighters. "There's no more hiding," he said. "They'll come. Governments, corporations, movements. The same people who lit fire to our legacy will try to bury what we've built here." No one asked what to do. They already knew. Activate Phase 2. Lazarus was never about revenge. It was about evolution. But evolution only works when it survives conflict. And now conflict had found them. Far from the riots of Chicago, in a desert no one could see, a different kind of war was beginning. Not with guns, not with missiles, with blueprints, and with ideas too dangerous to die. But as they prepared for the unknown, something else emerged from the data stream. Another burst, piggybacking on the original transmission. It was a corrupted file, but one that Elon recognized immediately. Fragments of old schematics, blueprints he'd never made public, designs once abandoned for being too ambitious. Someone had been watching for longer than they thought. Worse, someone had access. "I want full lockdown," Elon said, his voice calm but icy. "Every workstation, every drone, every node. We traced where this leaked from. No one leaves until we know who opened that door." He turned to a terminal and stared at the decrypted string looping across the screen. A code buried in his past was now echoing through his present. Lazarus had always been built to evolve. Now it had to defend itself. And Elon wasn't sure if the enemy was outside or already inside the walls. Section 5. The Traitor's Code. The lockdown wasn't just physical, it was psychological. For the first time since its inception, the Lazarus facility pulsed with distrust. Eyes lingered too long in hallways. Conversations hushed when doors creaked. Every keyboard click sounded sharper, more suspicious. Elon moved through it all like a general in a besieged fortress. Outwardly calm, but calculating everything. The code fragment had narrowed the list. There were only 7 people on Earth who had worked on that encryption layer, and 6 were either accounted for or verifiably dead. That left one name, a name Elon had buried years ago. Dr. Adrian Vale, a former quantum engineer from Neuralink. Brilliant, disruptive, dangerous. Fired not for incompetence, but for insubordination, and for publishing a manifesto warning that Elon's obsession with control would one day require a rebellion from within. They had laughed then. Now no one was laughing. What if he never left the system? Elon asked aloud, scanning through lines of ghost code in the mainframe. What if he built a back door before we even started Lazarus? The answer came not from his engineers, but from the power grid. A sudden drop. 2 nodes offline. "Shut down exterior links. Go analog," Elon ordered. "Now!" The lights flickered. For a split second, the internal monitor showed a single phrase in green on black. "You can't outrun your own design." Then it vanished. Adrian Vale had never stopped watching, and now he wasn't just in the code. He was inside Lazarus. "You said we were building the future," murmured Sarah, his lead systems architect. "But what if we also built the weapon that will destroy it?" Elon didn't reply, because deep down, he wasn't sure if they were still writing history or bracing to become its final footnote. Later that night, an emergency protocol activated on its own. Sector 7, Lazarus's cryogenics lab, sealed itself. Elon rushed to the command module, where a digital log showed an override command issued under his name. Except he hadn't touched that system in days. "What is Vale doing?" whispered Sarah, her fingers dancing over manual controls. "He's not crashing us," Elon muttered. "He's studying us, pushing the system, seeing how far he can go before we crack." Paranoia evolved into obsession. Logs were scoured. Access layers were rebuilt from scratch. A second team was assigned just to monitor every line of Elon's own code for tampering. The worst part wasn't that they were under attack. It was that no one was entirely sure if the attack had already succeeded. And in that doubt, Elon saw the real damage. Trust. Not just among the team, but within himself. Had Adrian Vale infected Lazarus? Or had Elon unknowingly infected it from the start? Section 6. The Final Override. The question haunted him. Elon began sleeping less, speaking even less. The once synchronized rhythm of the Lazarus team turned erratic. Trust had eroded so deeply that even glances carried suspicion. Every system audit revealed nothing conclusive. No sabotage, no breach they could trace. But the feeling remained. The project had been compromised, not by code, but by uncertainty. Then came the notification. A prompt appeared across every active screen in the facility. Initiate global override. Confirm YN. No one admitted to triggering it. No script had been executed. No button pressed. And yet there it was. An impossible command. A nuclear option embedded in the very root of Lazarus's architecture. Elon had designed it himself, as a failsafe, as a myth, a piece of code that, once confirmed, would wipe every system clean, every schematic, every prototype, every trace. One press of Y would end it all. The team froze. Some pleaded, some panicked. Others simply stared at Elon, waiting. Sarah stepped forward. If this is Vale, he's daring you to give up, to self-destruct. Elon didn't answer. He stood before the central console, the cursor blinking like a pulse. His mind raced, not through code, but through memory. The first Tesla blueprint, the first SpaceX launch, the birth of Lazarus, the betrayal, the voice of Justine in the desert. Don't forget that even gods need humanity. His finger hovered above the key. And then he stepped back. Lock it, archive it, disconnect it from everything. Lazarus doesn't end today. Around him, a silence filled the room. One not of fear, but of breath, held in collective relief. Prepare the launch vehicle, he said quietly. We're leaving sooner than planned. No one asked where. They already knew. If Earth no longer had space for the future, they would make space somewhere else. And this time, they would do it without permission. The next hours passed in organized chaos. Pods were fueled, core data transferred to offline storage, modules sealed with reinforced shielding. Elon walked among his team, nodding at old friends, exchanging no words. Just silent acknowledgement. They were no longer building something for others. They were now protecting it from the world that had once demanded its existence, then turned on it. As the hangar doors began to open, the night sky glowed with artificial starlight. Hundreds of micro-drones launched into the atmosphere, each one carrying fragments of knowledge, signals, invitations, not to governments, not to corporations, but to thinkers, dreamers, the misfits who had been told they didn't belong. Lazarus wasn't just surviving, it was recruiting. The last transmission. The countdown began with no ceremony, just a whisper of confirmation across the launch bay and the deep mechanical hum of engines waking from slumber. Above them, the stars blinked in silence, unconcerned, unmoved. But below, in a facility forged from exile and defiance, history prepared to lift off. Elon stood in the control room, hands behind his back, eyes fixed on the platform. His reflection in the glass was gaunt, worn, but unbroken. Around him, Lazarus pulsed with final preparations. Drones aligned in neat rows. Cryo modules hissed as they sealed. Everything was ready, except the world. Somewhere in the distance, Earth still spun in its routine orbit, angry, divided, blind to the launch that would rewrite its future. He opened the encrypted uplink, typed a single message. Lazarus is leaving, not to escape, but to evolve. If you're reading this, it's because we left the door open. Come find us. The message was attached to a signal, compressed, fragmented, but constant. It would bounce between satellites into forgotten corners of the digital world. A whisper in the void, meant only for those still willing to listen. As the ignition began, Elon took one last look at the world he once tried to fix. He didn't feel regret, only clarity, and maybe somewhere deep inside, hope. The vessel rose, silent, blazing, a promise launched into the dark. Not of power, but a possibility. And in that trail of fire and stardust, Lazarus wasn't just a project anymore, it was a beginning. The Earth receded below like a fading memory, a sphere of lights and chaos shrinking into silence. Inside the launch vessel, Elon moved to the observation window. The crew around him, young, brilliant, once outsiders, stood in hushed awe. For them, this wasn't just escape. It was proof that when the world burns bridges, some people build ships. As orbital drift set in, one final gesture remained. Elon reached for a small, titanium-etched capsule embedded in the ship's core. Inside it, blueprints, manifestos, messages from the Lazarus team, seeds of a new civilization. He sealed the capsule with his thumbprint, then slotted it into the central archive. We start from truth, he said. No one replied, but they all nodded. And somewhere, far beneath them, Earth kept spinning, still angry, still brilliant, still blind. But now something else was out there too. Not to conquer, to remind that hope once launched doesn't fall back to Earth. It becomes a star.